Story 1. Before I begin, I want to mention that I know I'm not a good person. I know you have no reason to feel sorry for me, but something happened at 542 Maple Lane that is simply not natural. My name is Tom. I'm not a bad guy or anything, but money has always been tight for me. I've had to resort to less than honorable endeavors on many occasions, one of which is robbery. The beautiful thing about Halloween is not the candy. It's not even the scary movies. It's the chance to walk around completely unidentifiable without any repercussions. Hell, it's even encouraged. Every year, my brother Pete and I stage a robbery of an unsuspecting family. We simply choose a couple that we know have young kids a few days before Halloween. We then go to the family's house during peak trick-or-treating hours. When we know that they are gone, we put on our masks, act like we are trick-or-treating, and quietly break into the house. Last year, we were able to steal more than $10,000 worth of jewelry. It was great. This past Halloween, things got very bad. I can't tell the police or anyone, but I had to get this off of my chest. A few days ahead of Halloween, we decided that our target family would be the Allens. The Allens were very wealthy, and we had seen Mrs. Allen out and about with very expensive jewelry on many occasions. They also had 3 young kids who would undoubtedly want to go trick-or-treating. Pete and I put on some cheap clown masks to mask our identities in case someone noticed what we were doing and went to the Allens' house. After observing the house for about a half hour and not seeing them answer the door for any trick-or-treaters, we figured that they had gone trick-or-treating with their kids for the evening. Pete and I slowly walked to the house and rang the bell. If they answered, we could just act like innocent trick-or-treaters, and if they didn't, it was a sign that they were not home. After 3 rings of the bell, we began picking the lock to their front door. Pete was a whiz at picking locks. Within what had to be 2 minutes, we were in the house. After we ransacked the first floor, I told Pete to go up the stairs to check the bedrooms. I wanted to stay on the first floor to keep a lookout. A few minutes later, I heard a large bang come from the upstairs. "Pete?" I yelled, not wanting to scream too loud in case someone heard us from outside. After calling for Pete a few more times, I went upstairs to see what the issue was. When I entered the master bedroom, my blood ran cold. The entire family lay dead on the floor of the bedroom. There was blood everywhere. Pete was also on the ground. He was convulsing, as a large pale figure was feasting on his neck. The figure had to be over 7 feet tall. It had what appeared to be very sharp teeth. I screamed at the top of my lungs and began sprinting down the stairs. Before I could get out, the figure leapt with ease into the upstairs hallway and followed me down the stairs. It dove for me as I exited the front door and attempted to grab me with its large hands. I felt a cut on my left calf as I fell down the stoop and into a bunch of trick-or-treaters. I quickly sprinted home and noticed a large gash on my calf. I don't know what that thing was on Halloween, but ever since then, I've been feeling a bit off. At night, I simply cannot sleep, and I'm becoming more and more hungry by the day. Normal food just isn't doing the trick anymore. If I keep getting hungrier, there's no telling what I will do. Stay safe out there this Halloween. You never know what you are going to find. Story 2. It all started off as the perfect Halloween. Fall leaves were scattered across the streets. There was a slight brisk in the air, and my parents let me take my little brother Daniel out to trick-or-treat on our own. We spent most of the day trick-or-treating with a group of our friends. We went from house to house and enjoyed a ton of candy. At the beginning of the night, we saw a large man dressed in a Michael Myers mask in the distance. He jumped out from behind a bush and scared a bunch of other kids. Their parents all laughed and continued on their way. When it started to get a bit dark out and the streets began to quiet down, all of the other members of our group went home, and it was just me and Daniel. When I told Daniel it was time to go home, he immediately protested. He begged me to take him down a few more blocks. At first I was reluctant, as it was getting pretty late, but then I stared down at his bag of candy and remembered how much I loved trick-or-treating as a kid, so I promised him we could stay out for another half hour. After knocking on a few more doors, we slowly started walking the mile or so back to our house. As we were walking, Daniel grabbed me by my hand and pointed a few hundred feet behind us. It was the guy in the Michael Myers mask again. He was just standing there under a streetlight and staring at us. His hands were both in his pockets. Startled, but assuming it was some older kid trying to scare us, I told Daniel to just keep walking. After a few more minutes, I checked behind us again, and the man was no longer there. After we made it home, we went inside to watch some scary movies before my parents got home. Daniel and I were sitting in the television area on the upstairs level of my house. Daniel told me he was somehow still hungry after devouring all of his candy. I told him I would go downstairs to get us some microwavable popcorn. I walked downstairs to our pantry to grab a bag of the popcorn and walked back upstairs. As I was waiting for the popcorn to stop popping, I called to Daniel, telling him to pause the movie. It was a really good movie, and I didn't want to miss anything. He didn't answer me. After calling 2 more times, I walked towards the television room. When I opened the door, I nearly fainted. The man in the mask was standing in the television room. Instead, this time, he was holding a large machete. Suddenly, someone grabbed me from behind. It was Daniel. He must have noticed that someone was in the house and hid out in another room. I slammed the door shut and sprinted out of the house with Daniel. We ran to our next-door neighbor's house and called the police. The police never found the man in the mask. When they entered our house, they found our couch completely cut up, presumably by the machete. On the couch laid a note that said, "I will see you next year." Needless to say, I'm not looking forward to Halloween this year. My parents bought us new locks and even adopted a new dog, but who knows if that can keep us safe. Stay safe this Halloween, and always beware of the man in the mask. Story 3. It was my sophomore year of high school. I was too old to trick or treat at that point, but that didn't mean that I was too old to prank my neighbors on Mischief Night. For those of you who don't know, Mischief Night is the night before Halloween. It's known as the biggest prank night of the year. Me and my 2 friends, Ben and Zach, wanted to pull a prank to remember. None of us liked our school principal, Mr. Rollins. Mr. Rollins was the typical jerk. He gave us detention far too many times, and you would be surprised to see how easy it is to find someone's address with a quick Google search. We bought a few dozen rolls of toilet paper and some shaving cream and drove to his house. It was about 2 in the morning by the time we arrived. He lived in a large colonial surrounded by mostly woods. It appeared as if it was abandoned. I was driving, so I dimmed the car's lights to avoid any attention and slowly approached the house. All 3 of us hopped out of the car and slowly began throwing the toilet paper all over the trees on his front lawn. We were really getting him good. After going on to spray paint his front lawn with a giant curse word, I was ready to get going. As I began walking towards the car, Ben and Zach pulled something out of their backpacks. It was eggs. They told me to wait so they could toss a few eggs onto his stoop. I reluctantly said okay and waited near my car. Zach and Ben began slowly tossing the eggs. After landing a few right on the stoop, Zach tossed one a bit too hard and it knocked over a flower pot, shattering it. Suddenly, the door flung open. It wasn't Mr. Rollins. It was a large man with a grin on his face, and he had a huge crowbar. "You're mine now, little children," the man yelled at the top of his lungs. Zach and Ben both started sprinting towards my car. Ben reached the front door and got in. We both looked back and saw Zach on the ground. The man raised the crowbar high into the sky and hit Zach square in the head. He continued pounding Zach's head in. Zach slowly stopped resisting and went stiff. The man slowly stared up and smiled. It was a weird smile, completely full of terror and devoid of any guilt. The man suddenly started sprinting towards my car. Afraid for my life, I hightailed it out of there. Ben and I quickly called the police and reported the incident. What the police reported back changed our lives forever. Zach was dead. He had died of blunt force trauma to the head. The police said that the house was not owned by Mr. Rollins, but it was abandoned, and the previous owners had not lived there for years. The police found 7 dead bodies stored in each room throughout the house. They said that Zach's attacker had been living with them for what had to be months. Stay safe on Mischief Night. You won't know what you're getting yourself into until it's too late.